Hi, boys and girls. Today I'm going to read you the story, I Am Amelia Earhart. This is actually based on a real person. Amelia Earhart was a real person who lived a long, long time ago. She was a famous female pilot. Actually, she was one of the first ever female pilots in the world. She is known for her hard work and her determination and for all these aviation records that she broke. She was one of the first people to ever cross the Atlantic Ocean by airplane. She was the first person ever to cross the Pacific Ocean by airplane, and she wanted to try to circle the entire world, be the first to circle the entire world by airplane. Sadly, that did not happen for her. So as I read this story, something that good readers do is they make connections to the story to help them better understand. So as I read this story, I want you to think, does this remind me of something in my life? How can I make a connection to this story? I am Amelia Earhart. When I was little, people told me that girls should wear dresses and play with dolls. They said we shouldn't have unladylike adventures. I didn't agree. I already have a connection to this story. Amelia Earhart, she reminds me a lot of Campbell. Campbell does not like dresses or dolls. She likes to go in the woods and go hiking and climb trees. She's not a girly girl. In fact, when I was 7 years old, my sister and I decided to build our own roller coaster in our backyard. We placed 2 planks of wood up against the side of our tool shed. Grandma's not gonna like this. The cab was a wooden packing box with roller skate wheels attached to the bottom. We greased the wood with lard so we'd move super fast. Amelia, are you sure this is a good idea? This isn't a good idea. It's the best idea. Of course, I got to ride first. This was my moment. Here we go in 3, 2. What do you think's going to happen? I still remember the wind in my face. My stomach seemed to sink. I was flying. Amelia Earhart, take it apart this instant. The crash was so loud and noisy, it certainly wasn't ladylike, but it was awesome. That was awesome. Does this remind you of anything? It wasn't the last time I would fly. As I got older, I went to many air shows. When I was 23 years old, but still a kid at heart, my dad took me to meet Frank Hawks, a man who would eventually set many of his own flight records. You ready? I'm ready. For $10, Hawks agreed to take me on my very first flight. For 10 minutes, we flew through the sky and out and over the Pacific Ocean. By the time I was 200 or 300 feet off the ground, I knew one thing. I had to fly. This reminds me of a time that Campbell Cooper and Mr. Wallace and I took a little airplane ride above our house in our neighborhood and saw our town. It was really fun. To save for my flying lessons, I worked as a truck driver, which wasn't ladylike either. Move it, Mac. A stenographer, which is a fancy schmancy word for someone who writes down what people say. Blah, 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 blah. And even a photographer. Say snook. 6 months after I learned to fly, I bought a bright yellow used biplane that I named Canary. Canary is a cool name for a plane, right? This is my instructor, a woman named Netta Snook. That's her real name. But here's my secret. I wasn't a natural. I wasn't the best pilot. I just worked harder than anyone else. That's enough for flying today. No, I can do better. One more flight. She's very determined. Can you think of a time that you were determined? Most important, like that day on the roller coaster, I dared to do what so many said couldn't be done. A girl flying across the Atlantic. Amelia, you sure this is a good idea? This isn't a good idea. It's the best idea. I became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, and then the first woman to fly by myself across the Atlantic. Back then, people took boats to get to Europe, sailing for weeks. Planes were still a new thing. In fact, on the day I took off, one magazine ran an article that said women would never be able to fly that far. She proved them wrong. But I did. To do it, I had to fly for 14 hours and 56 minutes with no rest, no break. Sometimes the sun was so blinding I could barely see where I was going. In the process, I also broke the record for crossing the ocean in the shortest time, doing it faster than any man or woman ever. That is awesome. In October 1922, I broke the woman's altitude record by rising to 14,000 feet. And in July 1930, I set a speed record of over 181 miles an hour. Then I broke an altitude record, which is just a fancy schmancy way of saying I went higher than anyone else. How high did I go? About 12 Empire State Buildings straight up, at a time when no woman had ever gone that high. In my life, I took many flights. Every single time, there was someone who said that I wouldn't be able to do it. Never let anyone stop you. Whatever your dream is, chase it. Work hard for it. You will find it. It's the best lesson that I can give you. I am Amelia Earhart. I know no bounds, and I hope you'll remember that the greatest flight you'll ever take is the one no one has tried before. Never interrupt someone doing what you said couldn't be done. Amelia Earhart, and this is a picture of her. All right, even though you're not exactly like Amelia Earhart and you're not flying planes, I still had a lot of different connections to this book. So, what is one connection that you had to Amelia Earhart?